Let's begin the 5 sessions. Today is also hot, okay. Let's begin with session 5. Today's second session. This session will be argued about the new media and its possibilities. In a sense, we are accustomed to argue about the new media in a formula way, but today's speech will tell us another more sensitive story. Mr. Lawrence Liang, maybe you know better than I about him, but he is original Chinese but born in India. Now teaches in Bangalore. Okay, listen to his story, please.
Thank you. The challenge, of course, is whether new media's potential for creating disturbances is greater than the potential of like a gentle afternoon breeze in a post-lunch scenario to keep you awake. But as someone who believes in fundamental rights and the fundamental right to sleep, if you do nod occasionally, I will not, impinge your right. The presentation I'm giving today is called Ksahamta, New Media and the Disturbance of Potential. And I want to begin with a quote which I'll return to at the end, which is, in Hindi, the word for where is Jahan. The word for world too is Jahan. And this is written by the Cyber Mahalla ensemble, whose work I will be focusing on, and particularly their writings on media and on technology. Initially, when I was asked to talk today, I was asked to speak about the internet, which seemed to be a bit vast as a topic to talk about. And even though there are many things which are interesting that one could say about the making and the remaking of publics in the context of the internet, and this has really been in some ways a part of the work that Ravi and I have been doing on media piracy and the formation of cinephilia cultures, new cultures of bibliophilia in the underground book sharing networks, etc. I thought it would be more interesting to frame the question of circulation of ideas. Oh, yeah, sure. I've been asked to put on my Chinese persona and not my Indian one, so I'll speak a little slower. So I thought it would be interesting to frame the question of circulation of ideas via this idea of the Asian reality, which is one of the keywords in the concept note. So the question of what is an Asian reality when thinking about the internet, or thinking about cyber practices and cyber publics. For a very long time, one encountered very little scholarship on cyber cultures or cyber publics in South Asia, where the internet was seen to be an elite preoccupation, and internet technologies came to India as a signifier of neoliberal politics and a globalized post-modernity, which, as Nishant Shah describes, went more or less hand in hand with satellite television, international music videos, beauty pageants, and Kentucky Fried Chicken. It was also assumed that a lot of the theories that emerged in the context of the West, Haraway's cyborg, Catherine Hale's post-human, were seen to have little or no resonances given the material realities of a country like India. So thus far, with a very few exceptions, there's been very little theoretical engagement with questions of identity, personhood, or constructions of self in the transactions between the online and the offline world. But this is not to say that there's been no knowledge produced around the domain of cyberspatial practices. So on the one hand, you have, for example, the official state discourses, which are always marked by a certain sense of an anxiety, a moral panic, around the pervert in his cubicle, the terrorist with the cell phone, the pirate downloading a file, etc. Or on the other hand, you have a predominance of the language of access and developmentalism, marked in what one would describe as the entire information and communication technologies for development, or popularly known as the ICT for D discourse. And most of the ICT for D discourses are really in some ways techno-deterministic accounts which are marked by a euphoric belief inherited from an older logic of state-driven modernity, in which people, and especially the poor, only emerge as the objects rather than the subjects of a digital imaginary. By abandoning any engagement with a critical kind of theory around technology and the internet, what we've created is a vacuum for not being able to speak about techno-social experiences in India, and let it be taken over by the vacuous kind of nonsense that the state and NGOs constantly produce. The Cyber Mahalla project, which was a project initiated by Sarai CSDS in collaboration with Ankur Society for Alternatives in Education, was in part a response to this form of framing by the state and the development discourse around technology. Consisting of a dispersed network of media labs and studios that facilitated young people from working class neighborhoods to experiment with diverse media forms and to produce narratives of the city, of intellectual life, and to reimagine the space of knowledge production. The CM project has significantly reshaped the ways that we think about media and of urban spaces and of neighborhoods. One of the projects that Ravi and I had coordinated was something called Media Piracy in Emerging Economies, and a subset of that project was an ethnographic research project conducted by the Cyber Media Collective called Media and Intellectual Life in Neighborhoods. One of the products from that project was a book that came out called No Apologies for the Interruption. For those of you who are familiar with growing up with television in the 80s, this is of course a direct reference to the ads that used to come up whenever TV went off, which said, "Rukavat ke liye khed hai," or sorry for the apologies for the interruption. Now, as a signifier or a kind of a reference to this, No Apologies for the Interruption is an account of creativity, innovation, and autodidacticism, which one rarely encounters in policy statements about media and development. It encapsulates what is often left out of the traditional development narratives of mediated access and introduces a defined logic of access as opposed to a paternal logic of access, in which the state intervenes to create conditions of access for the marginalized. A defined logic of access is the cultivation of a sensibility of the possible, a do-it-yourself attitude which does not wait for the state or for the market to deliver. The entire book is available for free to download online, and if you go through it, you'll find a bunch of really interesting things. There is a particularly fascinating account of a video pirate, video librarian, musician, RJ, VJ called Nandu. And Nandu, in collaboration with Love Anand, created this kind of a studio, a do-it-yourself cinema, which basically consisted of taking films and adding subtitles to them, but completely recontextualizing them philosophically. So you take a popular film, but you really make something completely different out of it. Now, you may not be able to read this, but if you download the copy, it's all available there. The project that I want to start speaking about is something called the Magic Chair. At the intersection of a number of streets in different neighborhoods across India, where numerous people gather to meet, drink tea, or just loiter in the hope of catching up on interesting news from the neighborhood and the world, you often find a small makeshift bench consisting of a plank of wood or a slab of stone placed upon a few bricks. If there is one word that could be used to describe these temporary seating places, it would be the word ordinary. But if there's one lesson that we've learned from anthropology, it is the fact that the ordinary is rarely the commonplace. I want to focus specifically on the writings of Saib Mohalla on technology and media to examine how writing and thoughtful media and art interventions have consistently sought to transform the ordinary through their work over the last decade, and have consistently opened our ways of thinking about the ruminative rhythms of everyday life as the worlds of the neighborhood intersect with that of the city, and media worlds with everyday infrastructure. Their sustained engagement with creativity and narrative forms have been based on building media upon ordinary infrastructure, and in the process transforming our imagination, both of the ordinary as well as of media. Describing the neighborhood in the context of the Magic Chair, they write, "At any point, one will find anywhere between 80 to 100 people gathered here. Many people in one place where each person has enacted innumerable roles in his life. The role at times being one amongst many who constitute a gathering, and at other times the role of one who conceives or organizes a gathering. As if countless characters make up each person. Characters that sometimes offer a cooling shade to others, and sometimes become a restless shadow that trails others. That's how nothing ever becomes stale, and every day, different and new companions can be discovered and sought. Standing here, people try to sense in one another the desire to bring something into speech. This square seems to hold within it a deep insight into listening. One listens to another not simply to hear him or her out and praise him or her, not only to wait for the other to finish their piece so that he in turn may get to say something, not only to hear and then offer one's critique or understanding of what she has said. Not only all of these, someone who has come here for the first time can immediately find 30 listeners, or 30 people, none of whom have been able to earn their wage for the day, can gather around one another, eager to hear what the other person has to say, and so perhaps stitch together an image of themselves and each other, which may be larger than what they would allow themselves otherwise. Here, someone who whitewashes houses can become someone whose imaginative ideas about how a house could be made to captivate everyone. A bricklayer can get promoted through the enchanting tales that he spins to the status of a head mason. In this passage, you get a rich sense of a place, and a space with its multi-layered histories, forming in a way a palimpsest upon which one can inscribe a range of practices that add to, even as they transform the space. A space that sometimes provides shade, and at other times allows people to bring something into speech. This is a space that also acknowledges that the conditions of speech are not an automatic privilege possessed by everyone, or a right exercisable by all, since it is a square, as we've been told, in which 30 people who have not earned their wages for the day gather. And it is the context of such lived realities that the CM Collective posit their media interventions. The Magic Chair was a media and art intervention in which the CM Collective suspended the ordinariness of the bricks that supported the bench by drawing on the walls behind it an ornate image of a red sofa bordered with gold, similar to those that we find in many wedding ceremonies in India, complete with the imaginary armrest. The installation was both physically and conceptually enigmatic, since it surprised you with its mix of hyperrealism, what could be more heavy in realism than stone and brick, and its magical lightness, what could be lighter than a painted sofa, as though its curious blending of fact and fiction were itself a refusal of a fatedness of the asymmetry between imagination and the limits imposed on it by material conditions. And in that sense, I offer it as a way of thinking about the internet and as a way of thinking about new media. Because the internet is often associated with the idea of the virtual in terms of virtuality and cyberspace, etc. How do we think about this following Deleuze, to think about the virtual as that which awaits its actualization, that which just needs, in a way, some kind of an impetus to pass on to the realm of the real. The Magic Chair takes for granted the inequalities of infrastructure and the infrastructures of inequality, but proposes a way of bypassing it. The work stages an interesting tension between two spheres, these two spheres of the heaviness and lightness, and it was as if the realm of imagination were joyfully staging an escape plan from an absoluteness of the limits imposed on it. At the same time, it also stages an interesting conundrum for us between what is foregrounded and what is cloaked. Does the existence of the imaginary sofa remind you of what lies beneath, namely an ordinary brick and stone bench? Or does its flamboyance render its material conditions to the background? The language of vanguardism is one that has informed a lot of thinking about art and intellectual life. But what if we were to think about a politics and aesthetics of the rear guard? Jivesh Bakshi has elsewhere described the politics of the rear guard as a spirit of the rear guard as both an attitude and a strategy, a practice that knows that in order to survive, there is a need for many do-it-yourself tools. According to Bakshi, it acts like a craftsman and builds them. That is, it multiplies them through diverse parts and forms that one can breed within debris. It takes this agility, porosity, and masking as a site for discovery, exploration, and connection. What informs and also allows the practice of the Cyber Collective is inseparable from the electronic transformation of everyday life across the 90s and 2000s, the emergence of a cheap electronic media culture across urban spaces, which forms a crucial part of the story. The last 2 decades have witnessed a massive proliferation of media infrastructures in India and in many other post-colonial countries. These include large media industries like those of television and cinema, but also equally a number of informal sites, pirate markets, small video parlors, MP3 download shops, etc., and cable networks that are run by a range of people. Ravi Sundram has elsewhere written that approximately 700 million people have cellular phones that also produce text, video, and digital images. After the cellular phone, a growing section of the population is now the source of new media produced. That in turn links to online social networks, mainstream television through citizen journalism, and peer-to-peer exchanges of text, music, and video. The cellular phone has become a transmitter and media production device. Activists capture police brutality and protest. Ordinary people enter the world of mass photography and share them with their friends. This explosion of a new media culture in India has transformed the terms of popular culture and communication as it is lived at the level of everyday life. Attesting to the vitality of the electronic everyday, Bhagwati Prasad and Amitabh Kumar's graphic novel, Tinker's Shoulder Tap, narrates the story of Delhi, but it could be true for many parts of the world, where scarcity and abundance, creativity and decay dance together, sometimes flirtatiously and at other times threateningly. Tinker's Shoulder Tap provides us with 2 images of Delhi's urban landscape as it morphed through the 90s and the 2000s into a mediascape of sensation and excitement, with extremely cheap media opening myriad possibilities for transforming everyday life through creativity and cultural production. The novel begins with, am I on the novel page, by the way? It's okay, right? yeah, begins with an almost barren landscape with a few telephone poles, tea stalls and hawkers in what seems like a typical working class neighborhood in Delhi. The comic then moves us through a rapid transformation of the space as different forms of media get added to the landscape. Television antennas that dot terraces to satellite dishes, video libraries, audio repair shops that double up as dwelling spaces, till the last panel, where urban infrastructure and media infrastructures merge, and the new media environment becomes the scaffolding upon which urban experience is built. So this is the last panel, so you can see the transformation from the first to the last. Acknowledging that these transformations opened out spaces beyond the classical development plus communication framework, the CM project hoped to address the interface between information technology and creativity in the lives of young people who live in a highly unequal society. Initiated in May 2001, over 500 young people from different neighborhoods have participated in various projects through which almost 500 people have passed through. And a group of 10 writers from the CM project have started the Cyber Mohalla Ensemble and produced 3 important books: Trickster City, Cyber Mohalla Hub, and No Apologies for the Interruption. The labs began by developing text-based practices that aim to create a new language, including a visual vocabulary, to redefine the city and the place of these resettlement colonies within it. The result has been a startling collection of media works, including essays, photography, animation, soundscapes, blogs, murals, multimedia art. Using cultural resources from traditional and contemporary popular culture, their work has become important alternative narratives to the economic, political, and social conditions that often marginalize its creators. For 10 years, the members of CM have collectively met regularly to write, think, and produce narratives that defy the conventional ideas of a neighborhood and to map various intellectual genealogies within the neighborhood that they live and work in. In a provocative invitation for people to rethink the ways that they see these experiments, one of the participants asked, क्या लोग सिर्फ यहाँ देखने आते हैं कि गरीब की बस्ती में लैब कैसे चलते हैं? Do people come here only to see how the poor run media labs? Beginning as a critique of the dominant technological imagination and mediascape, CM went on to map a counter-strategy grounded in access, sharing, and democratic extensibility. It was an experiment with media technologies that created multiple local media contexts in which the larger media networks which are engendered by the internet is possible. At the same time, it was an engagement with local histories, experiences, modes of expression, and creativity. In a text written in 2002, imagining the possibilities of the lab, they write, in its broadest imagination, one can see Cyber Mohalla as a desire for a wider and horizontal network, both real and virtual, of voices, text, sounds, and images, and dialogue and debate. Publication modes are and will be as diverse as wall magazines, posters, stickers, audio streams, and animation. The present technological juncture provides that possibility. The point, however, is to actualize it. One crucial difference between the CM initiative and the classical NGO initiatives is the joyful do-it-yourself attitude that persists in their work, which disavows accounts of abjectness and nurtures instead a sense of passionate curiosity. And a text written early in the days of CM illustrates this sense of exuberant exploration. Satellite televisions arrived in India around the early 90s, and like many other communication technologies, it was initially targeted primarily at the upper middle classes, with houses or apartment complexes having to invest in heavy infrastructure in the form of satellite dishes, receivers, and transmitters. The arrival of the local cable network based on a monthly subscription fee changed the demographics of satellite TV, but it was still largely out of the reach of a number of people. But given the logic of urban space in India, where these cable networks often have to travel through other poorer neighborhoods, it was not uncommon to find people figuring out ways of accessing cable TV for themselves through improvisation. Sometimes an ordinary safety pin inserted into a cable passing through one's roof would become an antenna. Dhirendra Singh's text captures both a sense of excitement around the new technology, but much more importantly, an excitement around a pirate sense that was beginning to figure things out for itself. And I quote, I remember a little about the time when we had a black and white TV. That was in 1994. Cable must have just started about when we bought the TV. Maybe at that time I didn't even have enough sense to think about getting a cable connection. The TV used to be kept in a room on the first floor of the house. Once, when I was sitting alone watching it, at that time black and white televisions did have remote controls, like they do now. Sitting all by myself, I thought, why not twist the TV's ears and change channels? I thought to myself that just like the transistor catches radio waves, maybe the TV will capture some cable channels. Twist by twist, I reached one such channel which was showing a film. I thought, why not try and move the wire around a little to see if the image clears up a bit. But the image didn't change. I thought something must be done so that I can watch cable. The cable guy's satellite was just 5 steps away from my house. The wires were tied to an electricity pole in front of the house. All that separated me from them were the electricity wires and the breadth of the lane. I cast a glance at the rooftops in the market. People had tied speakers, the rim of a cycle, and a magnet to the antenna of the roofs, and I thought something has to be done. I went to the kabadiwala, the scrap dealer, in my lane, and I bought a cycle rim. Then I went up to the roof, removed the wire from the antenna, and tied it to the cycle rim. Back downstairs to the TV, I saw that the cable transmission was clear. When Mummy came back from her vegetable shopping, she was surprised to see a new movie on TV. She asked me, there's a new film on TV? I said, I made it happen with my brain. She said, what did you do? And I told her, go up and see for yourself. I was sitting downstairs watching the film when she returned quietly and removed the rim from the antenna. I thought maybe there's some problem with the main transmission. She came down and said, go return this rim to wherever you got it from. And asked her why she'd removed it. She said, when your father returns from duty today, we'll get a cable connection. I replied with an okay. Papa came back in the evening and asked him to get a cable connection. He said we'll get it done at some point in time, but I was restless now for cable. And I sneaked Raju into the house and we started thinking of a new plan. And this is what I did. I took the TV antenna wire, removed the insulation, pulled out a few strands of the wire one by one. I told Raju, I'll keep peeling off the insulation, you keep winding it up. 2 hours passed. We estimated that the length of the wire would be long enough to reach across now. And I told Raju, you go stand on the roof opposite and throw 2 small stones from the window. I was on the 2nd floor and just below me was the electricity wire. Raju threw in the stones, I tied the wires I had peeled, the thickness of which was microscopic to these stones. Then I threw them across, but they got entangled in my hand and landed straight on the electricity wires. The shock I got. For a second I thought I was dead and gone to heaven, but I didn't relent, and I threw the wires once again. Raju was quick. He caught them and quickly swung up his arms. I ran up to that roof and simply tied the wires to the joint of the cable. I came back to find that the transmission was smooth and clear. Next day, Papa said, we'll get a cable connection today. And I thought, who wants to give 150 rupees a month? Rehne do, kya zarorat hai? Let it be, what's the need? This is an account of creativity, innovation, and autodidacticism, which one rarely encounters in policy statements about media and development. It encapsulates what is often left out of the traditional development narratives of mediated access, namely, the defined logic of access as opposed to the paternal logic of access, in which the state intervenes to create conditions of access for the marginalized. A defined logic of access is the cultivation of a sensibility of the possible, a do-it-yourself attitude which does not wait for something to be delivered. And in his conversations with Mary Zurnazi on the philosophy of hope, Michael Taussig suggests that it would be useful to think about hope as a kind of sense, much like our other senses. And elsewhere in the book, he suggests that hope is what one cultivates against all reasonable evidence suggesting that there should be none. For Taussig, it's precisely because of the life-draining threat posed by our material conditions that we need hope, referring to the temporary autonomous zones that people create to test the outer limits of freedom. Taussig asserts that even when imminent failure looms, autonomous zones provide a glimmer of possibility. I find Taussig's idea of hope, a hope sense, to be a productive way of thinking about how we frame the relationship between new media and the redistribution of potential. In an earlier piece, I suggested that one could extend the idea of the hope sense into other domains, rarely articulated as belonging to that of the senses or sensibility, engulfed as they are by their legal status. How, for example, might we think of a pirate sense, like a hope sense that is not a foregrounded sense, but a subterranean one, flying just below the radar of the visible and the audible, but ever alert to the possibilities offered, in spite of the apparent impossibilities of our material lives. While our capacity to lead imaginative lives are dependent in part on conditions, such as availability to resources and infrastructure, it would be erroneous to subsume one under the other. Piracy has always been overanalyzed in terms of its legality and status, yet under-theorized as a specific sensibility and attitude. And it might be useful to take a detour into one of the unanticipated bylanes produced by the monumental edifice called Bollywood. A number of you may be familiar with the film industry of Maligaon, which is around 8 hours away from Bombay, where over the last decade and a half, you've had a parallel film industry that has emerged in a way creating and churning out remakes of Bollywood hits, recontextualizing them to address local issues, but also now increasingly much more ambitious in their attempts to recreate even Hollywood. So you have, Lagan, which is remade into Maligaon Ki Lagan, and one of the most famous, stories of this is documented in Faiza Khan's film, The Supermen of Maligaon. Faiza's documentary, The Supermen of Maligaon, follows Nasir Sheikh as he sets out on his most ambitious venture, a remake of Superman for Maligaon. In the documentary, Nasser speaks about what makes him arrive at Superman. He says, I never went to anywhere to learn to make films. I would select different English films to screen. After that, I found Hindi films boring. Weak direction, I thought. So my film education was at the video hall. I learned master angles, master lighting, the works. I used to cut out newspaper listing of films being shown in Bombay. I play the same films here. I used to copy the posters and put them outside my video hall. This is what obsession leads you to. I just wanted to do something different, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And now the story has come to this, holding up a poster of Superman. The film avoids what would easily have become a semi-patronizing, semi-amused look at a small film industry with its quaint and quirky films, by focusing instead on the creative impulse and passion that drives the filmmakers of Maligaon. The Superman of Maligaon draws us into thinking about who a Superman is, what it means to believe that you can fly, and how lightness can overcome the burden of the real. It takes for granted, as filmmakers themselves often do, the very limited resources with which they make their films, and invites us instead to share the unlimited reserves of enthusiasm and energy that they bring to their craft. As a film writer in Maligaon says, when a writer has a thought in his head, whatever his vision, he never achieves more than 20% of it. Even if it is a Titanic, the output is 20%. To live with the other 80%, the vision, the characters who inhabit your head, no one can understand that pain, and no money can compensate for it. For me, the essence of the Superman of Maligaon is captured in a statement by one of the Weaver actors when he says, we don't have the facilities, but we're making films. That's what's special. We don't have great voices, but we're singing. That's what's exceptional. And we have no weapons, and yet we're fighting a war, and we're winning it. There is perhaps a lesson to be learnt from the Superman of Maligaon, and their finely tuned pirate sense that does not name the legality or illegality of an act, but marks an attitude to time, to resources, and to creativity. If the state as the benign promoter of arts and private corporations as owners of culture both promise access on paternalistic terms, then a pirate sense is one that demands a defiant access, which refuses to wait for Superman, and instead pretends that it can fly. It is to be found in Borges's village librarian, who upon finding that he cannot afford to buy new books, and reads positive reviews of them, proceeds to write those books on the basis of the title. Informal economies are alternative not only because they're quaint, but because they figure out a way of being in the world that extends beyond the formal limits imposed on them. Now let me return back to the magic chair that we started with, but this time via Brian Masumi's idea of potential. Masumi writes, the vague sense of potential that we call freedom and defend it fiercely, no matter how certainly we know that potential is there, it always seems just out of our reach, or maybe around the next bend, because it isn't actually there, only virtually. But maybe we can take little practical, experimental, strategic measures to expand our emotional register or limber up our thinking. We can access more of our potential at each step. Having more of it actually available, having more potential available intensifies our lives. We're not enslaved by our situation, even if we never ever have freedom. We're always experiencing a degree of freedom or wriggle room. Our degree of freedom at any time corresponds to how much of the experiential depth we can access towards the next step, how intensely we are living and moving. If we turn to the idea of potential in the neighborhood where the CM Collective works and writes, I would suggest that it's useful to think of the magic chair as a way of thinking about media. In crafting a magic chair, the CM Collective were acutely aware of its functions as new media. And the magic chair experiment encapsulates much of their philosophical attitude to media. By the time midnight approaches, everyone in the square would have had a chance to sit on the magic chair and would have played the role of a teller and a listener at least once. And if each night, by the time the clock strikes 12, one person remains who found that no one was there to tell him a story or no one to lend him a ear, what then? Someone who had the lyrics for a song but found no one to sing to. Someone who composed a musical score but found no one offered lyrics to swing it to. What then happens then? Unlike in the game of musical chairs, where the player who is left without a chair is eliminated from the game, for this person who gets left out, the square has devised something too. When the clock announces it is midnight, the magic chair is placed in the middle of the square. The person who has heard no one and told no one his tale is sat upon it. Everyone present gathers around it. Now he will speak and we become his listeners. From a description of the literal qualities of the magic chair, the same collective then move on to its allegorical functions as media to state. We carry the magic chair in our heads. What we search for are occasions of gathering and solitude that can accidentally activate these magic chairs. We engender our magic chairs in moments of stillness when the fullness of an expression finds its vibrations through us and around us. The magic chair is a condition that everyone carries and it's a matter of its activation. How do you build an environment around it that can bring the highest level of activation? In daily life, the place of the magic chair diminishes or expands depending on who and what it encounters. What can we do, or what do we create around ourselves? In what ways may we enter that which has been made by others around us, so that an activation, an expansion of this potential may happen in and around us? The magic chair, like media for the CM Collective, is a condition of possibility, and a recurrent word that you find in their text is the word Ksahamta, roughly translatable as capacity, potential, possibility. In one text they ask, how is it that writing and publishing a book seems inaccessible, dur ki baat hai, to many, but writing a script and making a serial seems quite the contrary? And not all forms of serials on TV, but those which are based on kahani kehne ki Ksahamta, the capacity to tell a story. Kya Ksahamta ka distribution ko disturb karta hai TV? Does television disturb the distribution of capacity? We find the idea of capacity occurring in different ways in the text. Ksahamta to tell a story, Ksahamta to present a body, Ksahamta to look at oneself, the tension between inheritance or virasat and creativity, the capacity between inheritance and capacity. And the first thing that strikes us about the idea of Ksahamta is it's marking a moment in time, a time neither in the past, which is virasat or inheritance, nor in the future, even though they may be related. It is a marker of the present of exactly where you are. Ksahamta could be located in thinking about the potential of a moment which either allows you to act or not to act. The magic chair produces a possibility in time precisely by suspending the overdetermined inheritance of time. They argue that what is amazing is that the words through which life is otherwise talked about, words of tiredness, hatasha, sukhna, nahi kar pana, despair, withering, impossibility, these words never enter into languages or conversations around media. In this media, they say, even when a father beats up his son, they wink at each other. They contrast this language of abject exhaustion that we are accustomed to hearing when speaking about the poor with another language, that of ardor. When someone says he wants to be a DJ, there's a vibration in how he says it, an uttejna or a stimulation. But journalist banna, that's equal to neendana, to falling asleep. That's not so surprising. After all, one doesn't hear all too often. Kya so raha tha, doesn't one hear too often, kya so raha tha media? Wasn't the media sleeping? Like the police, the image of the media is something which is perpetually wide awake, and the question then is, what is it about the media that doesn't tire or doesn't allow us to tire? How media is lived in the everyday combines with the behavioral as well as the intellectual. And they also say that here things are in the process of perpetually being made. The world becomes an expansive space where your utterances travel and will return to you, and they're global. Media is something that can neither be accepted nor rejected. Media personal be and impersonal be. Media from radio to TV to DVD players and the internet emerges one way or the other as a part of every person's biography. Without ever naming it thus, the CM's collective inquiry into a media mahal is a veritable list of the digital technologies that allows for the emergence of the cyber mahalla as a site of experimentation, and a link to others in the network, a space that keeps the archive of the environment alive. It's not surprising that they chose to call their research project Media Mahal, because the word mahal could imprecisely be translated as environment, but also referring to the setting up of a mood or a setting up of an environment. It is, in other words, an affective environment that attracts the CM's investigation and experiments with media networks. And one of the first rules of engagement for outsiders with the CM is the recognition that it's an invitation to a conversation where the only thing that one needs to carry is the Ksahamta to listen and to converse. In its formative years, the riyaz, or the practice of the CM, consisted of a weekly routine of sunna sunana, which is listening and being heard. A crucial period of the CM collective was the demolition in 2006 of a resettlement colony called Nangla Machi, in which the third Cybermullah Media Lab had been located. Nangla Machi came up after the floods of 1978 and grew over 25 years into a settlement with about 6,000 dwellings and a population of approximately 100,000 people. The demolition was a part of the process, a series of demolitions drives that were conducted in Delhi as a part of the cleaning up leading to the Commonwealth Games. And like many other resettlement colonies, Nangla had been built incrementally over the years by immigrants from various parts of the city, and over 30,000 people were displaced with the demolition of Nangla. Members of the CM collective created a blog, documented the demolition process, the surveys, and also created local histories of the neighborhood. And as a part of the process of documenting what was happening, they conducted interviews, collected documents as evidence for court proceedings, visited evictees in their new houses. They traveled long distance to look at the barren promised land of resettlement. And Suraj Rai, writing at that point of time, says, it takes many years for a place to become a settlement, but a settlement is barren in merely 2 days. People are watching houses being pulled down. Each time dust rises when the house falls, they don't turn away. They seem to be trying to take it all in. They plastered the walls and roofs of their houses with their memories. And today these memories have turned into dust and are spreading out in the air. One of the crucial roles played by the CM during the demolition of Nangla was the recognition that even as legal battles would continue, and even as activists would try to stall the demolitions for as long as possible, it was also imperative to retain and preserve Nangla in texts, in recordings, through conversations, a record that did not merely bear witness to a neighborhood that had been demolished, as is the case of many neighborhoods, but which had become the latest symbol of abject helplessness, but to paint an image of Nangla as it existed, of the rich and complex lives that it sheltered, and finally as a space that was filled with sounds and images erased by the amnesia of a bulldozer. A text written about the environment in the neighborhood post the 1984 riots is in a way kind of scarily prescient of what would happen in Nangla after the demolitions. Everywhere a silence hung over everything like a heavy unmoving cloud. No sound anywhere. Not of songs from the music systems, not of TV sets. Each night in every house, men took turns staying awake, holding in their hands anything that could be used as a weapon. Life stood still. Locks on the doors of every single shop. No light-hearted night-long gatherings on rooftops to watch movies, playing on rented VCRs. No more anticipating a tempo, stopping by a park and setting up a screen to project films on and entertain the neighborhood. The change was complete and sudden. The contrast between this particular text and their other texts is startling on account of the silence and the stasis that pervades the text. The CM archive of the city generally consists of a dense urban sensorium, which enables its members to be in love with the space that they're in and to allow for it to emerge in their imagination from time to time. Melissa Buscher, describing the CM form of writing, designates them as minor practices, by which she means small-scale, everyday practices that already exist in these localities, such as storytelling, keeping of diaries and journals, photography, and video making. She argues that these minor practices focus their attention on the minute to capture the everyday life of the community, the banal as well as the extraordinary. The Nangla demolitions, with its emphasis on identity cards, papers, documents, ration cards, and a whole range of state paraphernalia to prove residence and to claim a state, are a contrast and are symptomatic in a way of a much larger circuit of governmentality in which slums, quarter settlements, and resettlement colonies are simultaneously hyper-visible, even as they're completely invisible. They become hyper-visible only through accounts of urban crisis, crime, and illegality, while remaining absolutely invisible as spaces of culture and knowledge production. One of the challenges of the CM Collective has been how to posit themselves in relation to the dual processes. And I would suggest that a crucial part of their practice has consisted of creating a space of an agonistic illegibility, a self-writing that challenges traditional reading practices that attempt to render a space legible. There are two ways in which the discourse of legibility operates. On the one hand, there is a question of transparency. The rhetoric of development and governmentality chants the mantra of transparency and projects like the Aadhaar or the UID project are only the latest iteration of a long list of development projects that use the logic of classification and identification to attain its goals, often tied to welfare schemes from ration cards to gas connections for the poor. The project of legibility is, however, one that is written with a singular script in mind, the poor as objects of development. The other form of invisibility, or of visibility, is through accounts of piety. And this is framed, of course, by the NGO account that we are familiar with. The idea of an agonistic illegibility speaks against both these forms of framing. The CM Collective writes, the state prepares its eyes in such a way that it will recognize us and approve us only when we put on certain costumes. But if we were to appear before the state dancing, then how will the state recognize us or mark us? How will it speak to us? At the heart of the CM initiative is a playful refusal which resists the frames of legibility in which the poor are rendered visible. I will not be legible the way that you want me to be legible. It is not surprising that the figure of the trickster has been crucial to their self-articulation. What is it to be illegible if not the right to retain one's enigma in the face of easy, if misguided assumptions of legibility? Laura Marx, in her work on information, secrets, and enigmas, proposes that in the information era, where more and more images are produced at the service of information, data, surveillance cameras, identity cards, there is always a danger that images will become enfolded as information. She distinguishes between the world of the sensuous, to which images belong, and the rational bureaucratic to which information belongs, and says there seems to be a shift from perceptual to informational culture, which poses a problem for all aesthetic thinking, and suggests instead that we might need a better theory to account for this process. Following a Nietzschean approach, he suggests that force is a source of affect that accompanies every moment or movement of unfolding, or its refusal to unfold. For a certain virtuality to be actualized, that is, for a fold to unfold, we could say a force pushes out from the plane of immanence at the same time as another force pulls out. Virtuality is pushed through the plane of immanence in an active and creative moment, unfolding, bringing something new into the world. Finally, she argues that screen theory can ask itself where images come from. Did they unfold from information or from the universe itself? It can trace the process by which an image unfolded from the world of the universe, the question of why it unfolded in that manner. And if the image is here, then what images remain virtual? As posited above, the most interesting films for her are those that bear a trace of their unfolding. We can now add that the most intriguing of these films are those that unfold not truthfully, but enigmatically. And it is at the heart of the CM writing process of this idea of the right to retain one's enigma through which they encounter the world of media. And I will end with this last piece of writing from them. Every place maintains a veil. It also keeps certain things in view. Both keeping in veil and making transparent work together to let a place breathe. The survey is the eye of the state working with a view to gauge, measure, and assess a place. That which is being examined. How is it being examined? What does an understanding of this examination mean? When something is examined, the examination brings to a crisis all the signs of change through which a place has lived till then. The life of a place over 35 years, the sign of a life that made it, a struggle to keep it alive in the eyes of the city. Its weave, which is made by the threading of every strand of the self gathered each day. How will this examination fare before all this? The more you understand being gauged, being measured, being assessed, being marked, the more difficult it is to get to write it. This is not a crisis of how you will narrate a place, but whether it is possible at all to reproduce itself. The challenge is to think and write from within the possible collision that may occur between the force with which you are moving towards something and the force that's traveling towards you. If you write as someone who is of that place, who knows the place, then you will unravel the mystery of this place to make it apparent. If you write as a passerby and as a stranger, you do little more than to express surprise or turn what you have seen into an example to illustrate your thought. In either state, you will not be able to move closer to the enigma, which is an integral part of the making of a place. What then is the aesthetics of an agonistic illegibility? By refusing to be enfolded into the logic of enumeration via the tyranny of transparency, or refusing to unfold in a truthful manner through the burden of self-representation, I would suggest that the CM Collective helps us understand how a space and how media experiments and writing enable an enigmatic relationship to locality and its place in the world. Philosophy has always been preoccupied with the relationship between place, experience, identity, and thought, and many believe that a life of the mind is given form in the place and spaces that they dwell in. And yet it is curious that there still persists a division of labor in which some places are either brought into thought by others, or where a place thinks itself into being, it is seen as evidence only of experience, identity, and location. But thought, as with any other missing object, can only be found with an erotic attention to detail. And philosophy begins in the only place that it can, in the midst of things. The Jahan of where we are is the Jahan of the world. I'll stop here now and then maybe